represent Aspen Pharmacare, one of your partners today. May I firstly wish you, Connect, and all the many women out there that constitute our Rainbow Nation a very happy Women's Month, and in particular, may I wish you a happy event today. The event that you're hosting today, Connect, with your partners is a very important event for our country. Our country presently faces many challenges, social, economic, political, and otherwise. Some of those challenges go to the core of what women in our country are experiencing. They're experiencing what many refer to as the twin challenge. The twin challenge is rising levels of gender-based violence, GBV, in the one instance, and in the other instance, ongoing inequality as both experienced by women and also as perpetrated generally by society. I'd like to quote our Minister, Minister Maiti Nkwana Mashabane, Minister for Women in the Presidency. She spoke recently at a United Nations Women event and spoke about, she was following on the theme of the United Nations, which is generational equality for women and also reaching women's rights for an equitable future. That was thematically what the conference was about. I'd like to unpack that a little in today's context. The best way for me to unpack it is to say that business, organized business, corporates, and small business, businesses of all sizes and formations can no longer be agnostic around this twin challenge that we referred to earlier. So our challenge today is not only about the twin challenge and rising GBV and ongoing violence perpetrated towards women, ongoing inequality. That's not our only challenge. Our challenge is how do we get society to become more meaningfully engaged in these challenges. Events such as the one that Connect is hosting today, and the one which Aspen is very proudly partnering you on, is those type of events that will trigger that engagement in society that we so desperately need in order to achieve some real impact in addressing or turning the tide against the twin challenge that I spoke about earlier. So our message to the many friends and colleagues in Connect and beyond, and generally to corporate South Africa and organized business and businesses of all formations, is let's join hands as a South African business sector with the rest of society to look at playing a meaningful role in addressing the twin challenge of rising GBV in the one instance, in the other instance, this continued ongoing inequality towards women in the workplace in particular. Lastly, may I thank Connect for this opportunity you've presented for Aspen Pharmacare, a healthcare company, to partner you on this occasion. May I also pay tribute to the work that you have and will continue to do in the weeks and months ahead with respect to addressing the twin challenge, just generally gender inequality, and particularly for all the work you do in realizing the vision of a more prosperous, peaceful, and fair world to women and beyond. Thanks very much for this opportunity, and I wish you well in today's event. Thanks again.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome, welcome, welcome to every single delegate that's joining us in this conversation. Welcome, ladies. I have to say that I feel thoroughly honored, privileged, and I must be honest, I feel a bit special here. So I'm definitely, am I a thorn amongst the roses? Because it can't be the inverse, I think, right? But thank you so much, ladies, all of you, for joining us in this conversation. And I know that the next hour or so, we have a lot to get through and a lot to share. I'm looking forward to hearing from you, your own stories, personal experiences, but also I think just extrapolating what some of those gems in terms of how we do it. Now, disclaimer, this week I'm playing single dad. So I've got 3 kids in the house. My oldest is 10 and a half, he reminds me, 10 and a half. His name is Vusi. My second oldest, Amahle, is 8. And my youngest, the 3-year-old, we call him the chairman, Mobi, which means conqueror. I mention this for 2 reasons. One, to say, because it's Women's Month, we agreed in the house that I would try and experience life from my wife's perspective. So I'm playing single dad and working. I'm cooking, I'm cleaning, I'm doing all of it. I'm 4 days in. Somebody please save me. Help. Call 911. I'm being abused. I will take any form of help. That's the first reason. And the second reason is that my 3-year-old has developed the habit of jumping into these conversations. So I'm sure that you'll appreciate and understand if that happens. Right. So let's welcome then each other to this conversation. And let's create a bit of context around why we're having this conversation. Why Women's Day? Why Women's Month? And what is the history of this day? So for those of us who are not aware, we celebrate National Women's Day in South Africa on the 9th of August. It commemorates the day in 1956, where over 20,000 women, led by 4 women of different races and socioeconomic backgrounds, staged a march in the Union buildings of Pretoria to protest against the abusive past laws and bring about change. Many of those women are celebrated in South Africa today. In fact, many of them are celebrated the world over. And it's an important time, I think, for us to remind ourselves that nobody owns, for us certainly as South Africans, the struggle for our freedom, that it actually belongs to all of us, every single South African who has struggled to make sure that we own where we are today. Who's joining us in this conversation? Might I please welcome Koosum Kalyan, who is the chairman and board director of several listed and unlisted companies. Such a privilege and pleasure to meet you, Mom. I've heard an awful lot about you. When I put up a poster about this event, there are a couple of people who'd worked for you and with you who said, oh, I recognize her. Tell her I said hello. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I also want to welcome Dr. Anino Emuwa, who's the founder of Avendus Consulting. Dr. Anino, thank you so much for joining us. And I see you've got the perfect kind of Zoom layout with the books in the background. You've really, that's just right, you've done.
Thank you, Lucy.
Beverly Schafer joins us from the Western Cape Provincial Government, and she's in charge of international relations. Beverly, your reputation precedes you. And Vidromini says I must pass his regards, so thank you so much for joining us today. Alana Stott joins us as well. Alana, you're joining us. Where are you based at the moment? You're not in South Africa, are you?
No, I'm in Scotland, Lucy.
I thought so, yeah, because it says from the Mill Scotland Limited. And then when we spoke the other day, I thought that that accent sounded very Braveheart. It definitely sounded very Braveheart. So thank you so much for joining us. And we appreciate your time. We're looking forward to hearing your thoughts as well. Sara Milne Rowe, of course, who needs no introduction. She's the founder of Coaching Impact. Thank you so much, Sara. I've heard an awful lot about you as well. A number of people have had the privilege of working with you and going through your coaching system. Thank you for your time today. We appreciate it.
Very welcome.
And then, of course, the indomitable Roberta Annan, who's the managing partner of Annan Capital Partners. Hi, Roberta. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you. Thank you. Nomsa Philiso joins us. When I say Nomsa, Nomsa is with MultiChoice. And for her sins, she was also with the public broadcaster. Nomsa, we see you and we acknowledge you. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation.
Thank you.
And then we've got the amazing Babalwa Latsha who joins us as well. Babalwa, we're looking forward to hearing your thoughts and getting a sense of where you see the role of women going forward in South Africa today. So thank you so much, ladies, for joining us, for your time and for making the effort to be part of this. I was saying to somebody earlier, 6 months ago, the idea of meeting over a screen was completely foreign to us. And now we're all Zoomed out, webinared out, meetinged out. It's almost as if we've pivoted so quickly towards this new alternate reality. But thank you, ladies, so much. So shall we get started then? And Koosum, I wonder if I could start with you. I'd love to hear, and I think our people joining us would love to hear a bit about your own story and your own inspirational career over the next few minutes. Would you share with us a bit about yourself?
Did you say that to me? Because sorry, I misunderstood who you were introducing then. Were you introducing me?
I was talking to Koosum.
Oh, good. Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you for the introduction. Happy Women's Day to you all. And I think it's Happy Women's Day every day. I have 3 stories to narrate in 7 minutes. Firstly, my great transition from a very, very conservative, humble home and to be arranged marriage to a very fruitful and enjoyable career with lots of excitement and fun. By the way, I did not get into that arranged marriage. I canceled a month before the wedding. Against all the odds and difficulties, I enrolled at the university to study a BCom law, honors in economics, and I went on to then study at the London Business School. I think in my case, it all started with a very great understanding and a belief, which was sort of ingrained to me by my parents and my family, my extended family, to unlock life, and the need to push the reset button regularly. And that means whether it's in health or whether it's in your personal life or whether it's in your work environment, you just keep on moving. But my big breakthrough came when I was recruited at the university to work in Australia for 2 years. It was a fantastic assignment, worked as an economist on the project team of a feasibility of an open cast coal mine. Fast forward to my second story. I returned to South Africa after 6 months of holidaying in the Pacific countries and the islands and in India. I moved from Durban to Johannesburg, walked the streets of Johannesburg, headhunter to headhunter. All of them said I was overqualified. I think it was just a nice way of saying you have no chance or hope. So then came a call from an angel headhunter. After a few months and 150 letters to companies, an offer from 2 companies. I chose the Chamber of Mines, which threw me into the deep end as an economist. I worked with all the mining companies. There were many challenges, many difficulties during the apartheid era, but I broke every barrier that you can think of in my own way. It was challenging, fascinating, but I did it. At the end of the 7 years at my farewell party, I was asked by the CEO of one of the mining companies, why are you leaving? I gave the normal standard response, new opportunity, time for change. And immediately said, too many chiefs, only one Indian. So there was laughter. At the end of it, he asked me, so what's the reason for leaving? And my response was, there were too many revolving doors for chief economist. They went out as quickly as they came, and yet, and you know what the answer is. Well, I joined Shell South Africa in Cape Town, moved from Johannesburg to Cape Town. Within a few years, I was appointed Chief of Corporate, the first female executive for Shell South Africa, and the first in the history of an executive at Shell International. I received many congratulatory messages, but there was one message that came from my to-be executive colleague who said to me, the higher the rise, the bigger the fall. And that immediately for that moment, I was glad he said that, because on that day, I reviewed my own personal vision, my goals, my ambition, and I wanted to recreate me. I wanted a brand, I wanted an identity, and my own style of what I want and what I want to be. So I started creating that. I created a niche, not just focusing on what I do, but the sum total of who and what I am. The question was, how can I differentiate myself? I worked very hard at it and succeeded. I loved what I did, but at that time I was also co-convener of the Montfleur scenarios, which some of you may have heard, using the Shell methodology. And those scenarios were used probably in the whole of South Africa by the private sector and the Mandela and the Mbeki governments. I can tell you a lot about it, but today is not the time. What I did was I nurtured my network, not only focusing on a relationship that will serve not only my profession, but finding people who will inspire me, who will challenge me and mentor me. So I targeted people, and I had this inspirational list. And that inspirational list had people from the media, musicians, anthropologists, sociologists, chairmen, CEOs, academics, and others. I had a group of people. They all played a fantastic role in my life. I think it was a privilege to be rewarded for my passion, for my work. It was like getting up in the morning, going to work, and having fun. In scenario planning, we used to always say, roll up your sleeves and let's have fun. All going well. Then I was sabotaged. We don't know who, and I did not want to know. My office was broken into. I was followed everywhere. I felt my life was at stake. The chairman and the executives gave me protection. Despite all that, I got up every day with a desire, my passion to do my best at work. My courage meant that I did not allow fear to stop me. My third story, expat assignment to Shell International in London, responsible for new country entry and new business in Africa. It was a godsend. It changed my personal life, it changed my professional life, and I think it was the best. My portfolio for Africa took me to many countries, many times. Angola, Libya, Equatorial Guinea, Nigeria, Ghana, Algeria, Morocco, and others. I was invited to join several boards, private sector boards, think tanks in Sweden and Norway, and also Tony Blair's Africa Commission, where I headed up the private sector liaison. I think it's all in my profile. My colleagues at some stage started calling me the Queen of Africa. And I asked the question, why? And they said, it's the ease, the way you do business in Africa. He says, you are patient, you are tolerant, you spend 20 minutes talking about their family, asking them about the family before we really get down to the day-to-day business. But that's the way it is. We need to get to know each other. And what I really liked about working in Africa and my trips to Africa, I always spent time strategizing for NGOs, lectures to women, inspirational lectures, and mentoring men and women. I always believed in mentoring men and women. So and in fact, I currently do that too. I have many anecdotes of my journey through Africa, very fantastic experience. I wish I had time to share that. But what I can tell you, it was hilarious, it was scary, it was dangerous, it was beautiful, it was challenging, but more so, it was very, very fruitful for the profits, for the company. I learned in life, trust your instincts and your gut feel. It's the hardest skill to teach. I trusted that and I acted immediately. Sometimes life hits you with a big knock. Don't lose faith. I've been there. I went through major health issues. Don't lose faith. And this is my advice. Do what is great for you. Do what is good for you and for the others. Put a smile on your face so that you give a smile to another person. And success is just not about money. I learned that in a very hard way in my career. It's about the value add to the world, just not in your professional capacity. You know, and Steve Jobs said in one of his speeches, keep looking and stay hungry and keep moving. You will succeed in everything that you do. Thank you.
What an intro. Thank you so much, Koosum. I love that. I'd love to, there's a couple of, just touch points I'd love to double click on, and I'm sure time allowing, as we get into kind of the plenary part of our conversation, we'll do that. Allow me now, please, to welcome both Dr. Anino as well as Beverly. And ladies, I'd like for you guys to discuss for me, if you can, the perseverance of what it takes for women to succeed in the world of business. Of course, we know that women are in the minority in that space. And I'd love to get your thoughts around what it takes to succeed there. I come from the time when if a woman wanted to fit into those spaces, she had to adopt a character and a persona that was almost this very aggressive, muscular personality. And it almost robbed us of the effeminate touch that you require sometimes to make better decisions. So ladies, I'd love to hear from both of you about what do you think it takes really for women to make it in their own stead, by their own milestones, in the world of business. Over to you.
Beverly, did you want me to start?
Please, yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, when we're talking about gender diversity and, gender balance, we tend to think of the numbers, and, we get frightened about the numbers, and we talk about the top Fortune 500 and they're only 5%, etc. And that can weigh on you heavily. So the first thing I say is that, women need to be positive. That despite those numbers, that actually there are more and more opportunities. So the first one is to be positive. The second one, I think, goes back to what, you have mentioned, which is that about being yourself, authenticity. I think that we're living in a world now where people expect you and appreciate your authenticity. Now, authenticity doesn't mean that, of course, that you don't learn certain things. Of course you do, but you can afford to be your own self. Then I think there's the practical side of it, the hard part of business. And that is, if you want to succeed in the business world and rise up to the ranks, that you need to be able to, you have to do your best. You need to be, strong in areas of strategy, in areas of business, in areas of finance. You need to do those areas as well. Because we know, especially when you look at bigger organizations, that you'll see those who make it to the C-suite and to the CEO level are those who have gone through, the front office roles. So you need to make sure that, you are well versed, in those areas of the hard part. But then you have the skills, and that's where diversity comes into it. And that's where women, we add to leadership, we add to organizations. So you don't lose your authentic self, the skills that we have learned, the natural skills that we have in terms of bringing people together, play a strong part as well, as women. Then I think that, for younger women coming up the ladder, there's this concept of mentors and sponsors. And for those of you who are listening, I think, we can't talk about all of that right now, but I think, you need to, be sure that you have a mentor who can be somebody outside. Oh, hi. And you have a sponsor who is somebody within the organization that is going to help you behind doors in order to make sure you progress and make sure that you get promoted, make sure you get those bonuses. Somebody who knows about your work, a senior person, and who is basically at the table. The other thing that I'd like to finish off and talk about, we've talked about the corporate world, but in terms of entrepreneurs, there are lots of opportunities. Yes, entrepreneurship is risky, but of course the point is, how can you gain in that space? And one thing that you can do is, it's a lonely business, but you're not alone. You should try and find out those entrepreneurship networks. These days, when we were younger, we didn't have all those, incubators and accelerators, and all those networks. Find out those networks of entrepreneurs, the ecosystem, and join them, and you will get support as well. So I'd like to finish on that and give Beverly a chance, and perhaps we can put on some other points later.
Thanks very much, Anina. I think what's so important about this webinar is to be able to paint, or to be able to give the viewer the idea that there is a lot more to where we are here now, and why we talk about women and leadership in this space here, but it really is something that is attainable by any young girl growing up. And I'd like to talk about my story. I've achieved a certain level of success in politics, but I was never there for most of my life. In fact, I grew up most of my life being having a very ill mom who passed away in my 20s. And it kind of left me in a void of this tremendous drive and focus to succeed and to believe that actually I was on my own and I had to do this quite well on my own. But I didn't realize at the time that that journey in my life was really what I needed, and the tools that I needed to be able to become resilient and persevere in a time where I am now, and really where it's just really strongly male dominated, and to have those tools that shaped me for now. I remember in 2007, the credit crunch hit the mortgage origination industry, and at the time I was in marketing, and I was obviously the first to be let go. And for 2 years, almost 2 years, I was unemployed. But it was the most incredible gift that I experienced, because they were so tired of hearing me speak about politics. They forced me to go and get involved in the local branch. And that was the start of my political career. I became an activist without any pay. I learned the grassroots levels of activism on the ground, and what it meant to be passionate and drive what I believed was right on the ground. And through that time, I then got elected or got into the staff as a staff member of a political party. And then I stood as a local government, local councillor, ward councillor for my area in which I was living, and then persevered and drove my work forward to be able to be a member of the provincial legislature, and then had an opportunity to be Minister of Economic Development, and now in the last election got to be the Deputy Speaker of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. And what my message here today really is about the fact that you have a dream as a woman. You don't need to have the right background, whatever that means actually. It doesn't actually mean anything. You really just need to have the innate character, the perseverance, the focus to be able to achieve in any environment you find yourself, male dominated or not. And maybe that, you know, and in fact, I actually want to use a quote by Jacinda Ardern, who said very carefully that she was often criticized and is criticized because she doesn't seem to be aggressive enough, exactly as you've mentioned, Vusi. And her quote, as I'd like to say, is one of the criticisms I've faced over the years is that I'm not aggressive enough or assertive enough, or maybe somehow because I'm empathetic, I am weak. I totally rebel against that, she says. She says, I refuse to believe that you cannot be both compassionate and strong. And my message today is that more than ever, that female leadership is needed in the world. Now we need to have the compassion that we so innately have. Because regardless of where we are in the world, it is women that bear the responsibility of holding societies together. We need to be able to step into that space, no matter if we have a strong character that's perceived as strong, or a character that's perceived as much more feminine. It doesn't matter what it is, but there is a space for you in leadership. There is a space for you in the world. There is a space for your voice. And we need to bring those out of our young girl children. We need to help them to find their voice and to speak out in the world that we find ourselves in.
Absolutely love that. Thank you so much to both of you, ladies. So, Anino, I took a lot of those notes around having a sponsor, the networks. And Beverly, I love the idea that there is no archetype that you should adopt here, that actually just being yourself and being authentic is more than sufficient. In fact, that's true success, is achieving it without compromising who you are. I'd like to move on, if I can, to both Roberta and Sara, ladies. And what I'd like for you guys to address for us over the next few minutes is, so I'd like you to talk to the next generation of women. Talk to them about hope, about determination, belief, internal and external beliefs, as well as their self-esteem and confidence. What can they do? What tools can they use to build that? Because we do live in a world that bashes people down. They tell you to be unique, and the minute you are, they remind you that you shouldn't be. And I'd love to get a sense from you guys around tools, techniques, strategies that women can use to find themselves and to be themselves in the world.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for the opportunity. And I'm so honored and privileged to share my experience with you this morning. And of course, very honored to be part of this panel. And I congratulate all the women on this panel, as well as the group of women that are exceptional women that are part of S-Connect Women. I would like to start a bit with my background, because I think it's quite important to touch on some of, in terms of giving advice. I'm still young and I'm still on my journey, but I like to highlight, some of the things that I did and how I was able to manage certain challenges. And I think that would also kind of bring out some tools and advice to inspire other women. So just to start, I grew up with a single mother in Ghana. My mother remarried when I was 8 years old. And that gave us the opportunity to travel overseas. I hadn't traveled before until I was age 13, but I remember when I was very young, my mom has always been a philanthropist. So every Christmas, my mother would organize Christmas parties for underprivileged kids. So we would drive in my mother's Suzuki, I remember at that time, to villages. We would pack food, arrange chairs. And at that time, I was around 8 years old. And I was basically in charge of giving food to the young kids, arranging chairs and sharing toffees and things like that. And it was great for me to see at that age, the concept of philanthropy and giving back. And this was actually ingrained in my ethos. I had no clue at that young age that I would grow up, work in development, try to find solutions to some of the challenges that we're facing on this continent. But I grew up learning all of these things. I had these nuggets at that very young age. And I remember shortly after my mother remarried, her husband became High Commissioner. So we were given the opportunity to travel overseas to India. And even in Ghana, I realized the inequality, especially when it comes to educational opportunities between girls and young girls and young boys. Right. So girls would 12, especially in poor communities, while young boys were allowed to go all the way. So I saw that at a very young age. And I also experienced that when in India, at a very young age, that there was something wrong with me looking at things like a basic human right, which is education. It was the same challenge when it came to healthcare. And then later, as I was progressing in life, I realized it was also the same when it came to business and, professional career. Women were not giving the same wages as men. So I was like, okay, what can I do? There's obviously a reason why I went through this experience at a young age, and I've seen all of these challenges. And I was given an opportunity to be with influential people who had the voice and the financial means to make an impact. So how do I join that platform to give people, the less fortunate or the voiceless, the voice? That's why I started my work in development. I was very instrumental in setting up a lot of strategies that brought on financing for projects, whether it was ITC for development or women's empowerment or climate change adaptation. I did all of these amazing projects in Africa, but I realized that I needed to be on ground and on the continent. And as challenging as it was, I was still young. I wanted to start my business. My marriage had ended, and I had a 1-year-old at that time. I decided to take a very bold step to leave my job at the United Nations and come to Africa to establish a business. It was really it had resilience, and I didn't mention it, but when I was in India, my stepfather was poisoned. So at the age of 16, he died in my arms, and I had to break the news to my mom. She wasn't in Ghana at that time, and I went through a lot of pain, but that inner resilience, handle life challenges, to handle being a single mother and starting a business and you know, an advocate, started my business. I had just established my advisory business, and I would channel about 50% of my profits into my foundation just to support women entrepreneurs, because I went through those challenges myself, and I did not want other women to face, you know, similar experiences. And I also wanted to, I don't know if you know this, but in Ghana and a lot of West African countries, we do have a lot of female entrepreneurs, but raising capital is extremely difficult for women. I went through that when I was trying to raise capital for my business. I mean, it's very difficult to even go with collateral because most women don't even own property to provide collateral to get funding for their businesses. So I set up a grant scheme with some partners. I joined a women's empowerment platform, and we created a grant scheme that was giving very tiny grants, not much, you know, but it made such a difference. We gave them a business infrastructure, a bit of funding. We sat on boards to ensure that we could shape up these businesses to get themselves to a point where they can then bring in external capital. And I've been working in this space, you know, for the past 8 years since I left the United Nations. I've sat on boards, international boards. I've joined the United Nations Environment Program as a Goodwill Ambassador. I'm a huge advocate for the creative arts sector, and starting a fund which we're hoping to announce first closing very soon. But only because I saw the opportunity on the continent, I did not give up. I did not allow my challenges to deter me from pushing forward. You know, when I saw how resilient my mother was at a young age when she had to start everything from scratch and rise high to the ranks of her career, I saw that. And that is the resilience that I also have it within me to push forward and to support others. And because I've achieved a certain level of, and I want to go back to what Koosum said earlier about success. It's not about finance. You don't have to wait to be a billionaire to start a foundation. For me, it was about business support. It was about volunteering, sharing my idea, network, you know, and ensuring that people would, because I made a lot of mistakes as well because I didn't come through the traditional routes of business. I had to go back to Harvard Business School to learn basic, business because I'm a scientist by training. So I went back to school. So it's important to be equipped, because I realized that when I was meeting with clients, I was so confused about the language and everything they were saying. I'm like, oh my God, I have the network, but I was lacking the knowledge. And I'm very honest about that. I had to go back to school because most people who are rising in the ranks of corporations have started from the very basic level. So they've learned certain skills that allow them to make important decisions. So I needed to, you know, equip myself with mentors to ensure that I could carry on. So I'd like to encourage young women to do the same. Thank you so much. I don't want to go over my time. I've been warned.
Sara, would love to hear from you.
Thank you very much. So I just like to say to everybody that we all have choice. And I think with the world that we currently live in, with so many distractions and so many uncertainties, there is even more need for all of us to be really clear about where we pay attention. And so my big advice for everybody, for all of us, and I say it to myself first, is to be really deliberate around where we want to apply the effort. And I think that is a real skill and a real practice. And with the people that I currently work with, which are mainly leaders and many female leaders and CEOs, that is their main effort, really, is to how do I make sure that I'm not distracted in directions that's taking me away from my main effort? Where do I add the biggest value? How do I know where I add the biggest value? And for me, that is the absolute crux of it. And it's also about applying a practice to that. So I would say, if I had to offer two things here, is be a scientist on your own behavior every single day. Notice when you get distracted and notice, is that worth the distraction? And if it isn't, then have a practice that pulls you back to focus on what really matters. Become that scientist on your own behavior. So before I set up Coaching Impact, I spent 12 years working in really, really challenging comprehensives. And those young people, most of whom were asylum seekers or refugee status children, taught me so much about myself. And that gift is what really interests me, is watching all of those young people find their way because they had to find their way. And it takes effort and it takes practice. The curriculum for most of the young people that I was teaching was irrelevant. By the way, I think most of education curriculum is now very irrelevant. So I say, you make your own curriculum, guys. Choose your curriculum, choose what matters to you, but please make some effort and put some practice around that. So be a scientist on your own behavior. Find that confidence practice. Most of the very senior women that I work with, they all have a moment, be it an environment, be it a person, be it a system in which they're working at, which can pull them away from the cause that really matters to them. And they need, and lots of the work that I do with them is working on a practice outside of those pressure moments that they can apply in pressure. Because what I've learned as a performer from a very young age, we have to have a pressure practice outside of pressure so that we can apply it in pressure. Otherwise, we get distracted by the pressure point and often become something that we wish we weren't. So there are two little nuggets that I would offer. Become a scientist on your own behavior. Make sure that you have a confidence practice and a pressure practice outside of the moments of pressure so that you can turn up and be your very best when it matters most to you. That's what I would say, Lucy. That's all I'd say.
Absolutely love it. Sarah, it seems like after this I'm going to be calling on you for some seriously needed intervention. Seriously needed. As you're saying that, I thought, was she sitting in a board meeting with me? Because that's exactly what one of my board chairpersons said the same thing to me. So I'd love to connect and just double click a bit more, particularly on your methodology and how does it work, and so we'll have that conversation. Roberta,
very happy to. Thank you.
Yeah, great. So Alana and Nomsa, if I can come to you now, would you help us? Just talk to us a bit about climbing the corporate ladder. I have to confess, something I am terrible at. Having done it, just absolutely terrible. Never had the patience for the tether of politics and the corporatization of stuff. It takes a certain kind of, I think, emotional strength that you either have or you don't. So I'd love to double click with you ladies and just get a sense of what does it take to climb that corporate ladder. Talk to us a bit about sacrifices as well and the feeling of achieving success at the end of that. What does that feel like? Maybe you could run us through that, ladies.
Okay, I'll go first. Thanks, Lucy. It is true that not everybody is a corporate animal, right? And some of us, once you're in it, and you've seen people try to move out of corporate into entrepreneurship, and it doesn't work because not all of us are cut the same way. But it does take a lot of patience. Trust me, I know. I come from the mill. But I think the themes that affect women in climbing the corporate ladder are largely universal, because the degrees will vary, but they're largely universal in the sense that, it's the same challenges, it's the same struggles. And I just thought that what I really want to focus on today is some of the things that helped me to get through and navigate the terrain, and I think it's quite important for the next generation and everyone else that is online to understand that you won't always get it right. Okay, so there will be days that you falter and you feel like a failure. The important thing is not to stay in that pity party for long, because it's very tempting. Misery loves company. You want to sit in that space and just feel sorry for yourself, but don't stay in it for too long. And this doesn't mean that you will not be acknowledging the hurt or the pain, but it's just deciding that you are not going to be just too contained with it. And the thing about it is that once you get to that space, it allows you to be vulnerable. You allow yourself to speak to other people, and you'll be surprised how many other people have gone through those experiences that you may think are first. And so if you are vulnerable, you are able to then share those things. The other difficulty in corporate is the self-doubt. Other people call it the imposter syndrome. It's a self-doubt. You get given an assignment and you think to yourself, why do they even think I can do that, right? And it's important to listen to that voice when it comes, because what it does, it allows you to remain humble in saying, I don't know it all. And no man is an island. Therefore, I need to surround myself with expertise. I need to surround myself with people that will make me look good, people that will make me look better. Because you'll see that there'll be days where you go into presentation and you are in complete flow. And even you don't understand how you were just so smooth. You come out of that room and you say, was that me? And in those moments, you need to take a step back and celebrate that feeling, because it is that feeling that will propel you to do better. It is that feeling that will propel you to do, to go back there and say, you know what, I know what it feels like, to achieve something. And for us that are employed, is to never take things personally. Because you always have to remember that when you walk into that building, you're in a role that you get paid for. I always say to people, you're in character. So if things go wrong in a boardroom, don't ever take it personally, because whatever happens there, it's not happening to Kabelo's mom, but it's happening to the channel director, right? Because that's the only thing they care about. They care about you delivering what they've asked you. So if you are able to, because perspective is important, if you're able to separate, then you take away the emotion and you focus on what went wrong and how can you fix it. And also in corporate, you'll apply for a job because you think that you are ready, and then you don't get it. It's okay, because for every yes to you, there was a no to someone. So why should the no not happen to you? And I think that it's also important that you remain consistent in corporate, because what you do matters, not what you say. What you do matters, and you've got to be consistent in that, because otherwise it's just, as they say, talk is cheap. But I think the last thing that I want to say is that you need to find your why, because when all is said and done, if there is nothing that drives you as an individual, you then don't have that purpose. Some people, I think Koosum talked about it in terms of it's not about money. We all start off wanting a lot of money until you realize that money can't buy a whole lot of other things. But the feeling you get when you help others, the feeling you get when you contribute, those are the things that, you need to hold on to. Are you able to stand in the gap for the next woman? Have you been kind? Those are some of the things that you need to ask yourself every day, to say, have I been kind? Have I assisted somebody? So I think it's the small things, but it's the things that contribute to the whole that you then become when you're in that role and everybody thinks, oh, she's got it all together. But it's work. It's work every day and every night.
Love that. Alana, we'd love to hear from you. By the way, that's a beautiful name, Alana. What does it mean?
Do you know, it's actually just from my dad, who's Alan, so it's really nice. I'd love to put another spin on it, but that's basically it. I guess I would ask what the desire is for climbing the ladder. What is it that you're wanting to achieve? Like the other ladies have said, it's not all about money. There's many angles. What I'm finding interesting at the moment is we're experiencing a time that we've never experienced before. The whole world is. And the shining stars for me of the whole pandemic are the female leaders of the world. And it got me asking, why is it that women are making better leaders? And I believe it's to do with the primal instincts of humans. And during times of crisis, the male species primal instincts are based on things like self-preservation. He must survive above all else, he must breed, he must outshine the pack. So pride and ego often play that big role in the primal instincts of males, whereas as the females' primal instincts are a bit different. They focused on nurturing, protecting the pack, ensuring they've got food, shelter. So females are strong. They can stay awake. Any woman who's nurtured a newborn will know sleep deprivation and how to handle it. So in times of crisis, the female primal instinct doesn't have that pride and ego involved. So leaderships in times of crisis will naturally be better than somebody whose instinct is on nurturing the tribe effectively. So I mean, we all can identify those current leaders who are driven by ego and self-preservation, and that's where the failings are going to occur. So for many years we were told as women we were inferior or not strong or not as wise as our male counterparts. But years ago, and back to our ancestors, the women were recognized as leaders of the pack, and men took direction and respected us as the amazing beings that we were, and that's been lost. But I would revert to the old saying that it's the quiet ones you have to watch out for. Personally, I'm not a loud woman. I'm often told I've got a very quiet and soft-spoken voice. So I have to make my voice heard through my actions. I started working when I was 11 years old, and I quietly worked away to earn money. But then my mum passed away when I was 15, and the objectives at that point changed. I had to earn to feed the family. But I was never satisfied just in that working role. I had to, if I worked in a bar, I wanted to become the manager. If I was in a hotel, didn't matter where I was or what level I was, I wanted to keep achieving. When I was 19, I became a debt collector, which is a role that's not often associated with women, but I was told that I wouldn't be very good at it. I was the little blonde girl, I was quiet spoken, not ideal for debt collecting. I actually became one of the best debt collectors the company had in the intake of receivables. And it wasn't because I went in and I fought anybody or I was aggressive. It was because I took action. I listened, problem solved. I was trusted, and it was about integrity between myself and the client. I wasn't there banging down doors or demanding. I didn't shout. I helped them find the solution to the problem and resolve it with them. I then became a bank manager when I was 25. I had zero experience other than the bit of finance experience with debt collecting. I sent off applications, and the one thing I got very often was, why are you doing that? You can't do it. You've got no experience. You didn't go to university. But I went along, spoke to the regional manager and got the job. There was 2 branches up for a manager at the time, and I got the larger branch. A gentleman got the smaller branch, and he was paid £10,000 more than me. He had no better experience than me, other than that he was a male. And I felt at the time I could shout about it, or I could get upset, or I could just take action and prove what I could do. A few months after starting with the bank, the financial crisis hit in 2008. And within about 3 months, he was off work with stress. It was a very stressful time, don't get me wrong, but women can handle it a bit better, I think. At the same point, our bank took on 3 other branches. They bought 2 building societies. So I was given his branch to watch while he was sick, and then 3 other branches. So I was running 5 branches during the financial crisis, and they all became very successful branches. And at this point, I then approached my regional manager and said, this is what I believe I'm worth, this is what I want. And he really couldn't say no. He had to give it to me. So it was about not demanding, not shouting. I didn't have to have a loud voice to do that. I just proved what I was worth. So I would finish by saying right now that the women of the world are pulling together. As we've just heard there, we're building up each other's confidences, we're understanding their worth, and we're fighting. Our girls are dreaming bigger than they've ever had before, and it's amazing. Focus on the positives, surround yourself with positive energy and like-minded women, and we're going to be okay.
Absolutely love that. Babalwa, I wanted to come to you last before we kind of take questions from the people who are joining us in this conversation. So you are a captain at the Western Province Women Springbok Rugby. Now, what? How did you, so I've got a couple of questions, and I'm going to ask the question that I imagine most people ask you. And if you will allow me the latitude to be frank in this conversation, I will ask it, I imagine, the way people ask you the question. So first question, how does a woman discover rugby? Second question is, where do you find the confidence to get into a sport like rugby and play it the way any capable, competent human being would, when that's not quite the idea and narrative that we often hear when we talk about the sport of rugby?
Well, it's quite a good question, or good questions that you ask. You know, rugby is predominantly considered to be a male sport. You know, and that you know, just the physical demands of it are almost impossible for women to meet, which are largely untrue. I think you know, we've proven that time and again, and I've been asked all my career really, that why do I even bother? Why do I even, you know, put myself through all of that? I shouldn't be doing it simply because, you know, I'm a woman, and you know, that's the thinking largely, you know, when it comes to a sport that is so male dominated. And as a young woman growing up, even before the rugby, because you know, I'm quite different from you know, from all the other girls. You know, I've never been a girly girl. I've always had quite a physique and you know, quite a, you know, a strong presence physically. You know, and constantly you asked and you told really that you know, what are you? Why do you look like this? You know, you're so different that it's almost mind-boggling for someone to understand that you are a rugby player just like any rugby player, which is a sport that requires that you develop quite a, you know, a physique similar to any other rugby player, whether it's a male or a female. But if you're female and you are like that, it's you know, it raises eyebrows and it raises questions. And you know, I think the important thing is that we should try to change that perception when it comes to women in sport generally. You know, we know the situation that Caster Semenya found herself in purely because she was such a beautiful physical specimen, you know, endowed with such awesome genetics that there had to be something wrong with her. And you know, it's similar with us rugby players. There has to be something wrong with us, according to many people, that you play rugby, such a rough sport. Don't you get hurt or anything like that? And of course, rugby is a rough sport. Anyone would get hurt, you know. So I think it all starts with how we change the perception, you know, how people view female athletes. And I think it's important that we start at the bottom, start at home. How do we convince, you know, my mom, for instance, that a little princess grew up to be a warrior, you know, not you know, a little girl who plays with dogs but wants to get, you know, in the thick of things in the sporting world. So I think it's quite important that as young women we, you know, we start changing, you know, those types of perceptions. And it's tough because sometimes your confidence takes a knock, because you stand out so much, because you're so different. And I also find myself in leadership positions a lot of the time because I captain the Springbok women's side and also, you know, Western Province. So sometimes I do find myself, you know, in a mental situation where I get tired. I feel so drained that I constantly have to prove myself. I constantly have to prove how great of an athlete I am and can be, you know, and also try to influence those around me that, hey, we need to stand firm in what we do and what we love doing. And, you know, sometimes I sort of feel that it's not worth it. And I think for me, it boils down to the question of why do I do what I do? I could easily change, leave rugby, you know, whip up some makeup and weaves and just be a pretty little doll, but that's not who I am. So I constantly remind myself of my purpose. Yes, my passion is rugby and playing rugby, but my purpose, I think, is to change narrative that young female athletes, shouldn't be expressive. They shouldn't, be who they are. So I think that that's what I constantly have to remind myself that what I'm doing goes far beyond just Babalwa, who's this rugby player and whatever. But it's about grooming again. Like girls who are even younger than I am to grow up to be confident people who are able to have faith in themselves and just not be afraid to be to be who they are and be different, because everyone else is already taken. They're already who they are, but the key thing is to be who we are and celebrate that, embrace it, and still remain authentic in all of that, like one of the speakers put.
Just by the way, ladies, taking lots of notes. So lots of learning happening on my side here. A couple of themes that have jumped out at me, and Koosum, I'd love for you to help me this. Beverly, I think you can help me with this as well. So there's this theme around the imposter syndrome, which is this idea that this thing that people put in your head who you should be or expected to be. Now, Koosum, I imagine certainly in the early days of your career, it's not as if they let you in with the red carpet, right? Before you built a track record and a credibility, and before you became the indomitable Koosum, you had to justify almost your existence in the room. This thing of people going, well, it's like my mom says to me, there's nothing wrong with somebody asking you the question, who are you? But there's everything wrong with somebody asking the question, who do you think you are? Similar frame, but very different questions. And I'd love to hear from both of you ladies, particularly from women who are joining us in this conversation, who are constantly being fed this negative messaging into their minds. How did you deal with that imposter syndrome? Koosum, you first, that you don't belong in this room, that you shouldn't be here, that this is not a place for somebody like you.
I think you hit the nail, because that was one of the biggest issues. I didn't go into detail on this one. I think it's, I had to justify myself all the time. I remember, and how I dealt with it, I'll come to that. It's about, I remember someone, a very senior executive in the mining industry, asked me on my second day, "What are you doing here?" That was the question. And as we were going in the lift, and I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He says, "So what are you doing?" So I said, "Well, I've just been appointed economist. It's my second day here." "So are you South African?" "Oh, no, I think you come from Mauritius." So it was that, it wasn't welcoming. Welcome, it's your second day here. How I dealt with it is, again, I think this came from my parents. Be yourself, deliver on what is required. And slowly but surely, it will become better. And I must say, it did become better. I broke the barriers. There was, during the apartheid, you weren't allowed here, you weren't allowed there, you're not allowed in the executive dining room, all that. I broke that before apartheid had broken. So I actually managed to do that in the company. I think also I was determined to do so. And I was determined to succeed, because it was going to be, if I don't succeed, I will never be able to get onto another job. So this is something I had to do. And I succeeded, and it was just fabulous. But the first year was very, very difficult. And I think the key thing one has to do is to just deliver, even if it means working 24 hours a day. And that's what I did.
Beverly, your thoughts, and by the way, add for me, Beverly, the other part of the conversation, which is this. You're also getting into a field where people feel like you have no right to be there, right? It's not as if they're opening the door saying, "Oh, whoop-de-doo, come in, new person." There's well, you have no right to be here. So how have you navigated that?
So I think perseverance is something that I innately have for whatever reason, but courage. And Koosum's so right. I mean, I'm blonde, and so I'm not just of a certain diverse color. I'm blonde, and people go, well, you know, you live in a specific space. Why on earth are you doing this? But I really believe that we need people to fight for others, and I live by the motto of the purpose of influence is to speak for those who have none, who have no influence. And that's what drives me. I constantly have that kind of prejudice being put against me, no matter how long I've been in politics, whether it is going into countries where you most definitely are an absolute minority. I mean, I'm represent on the African Commonwealth Parliament. I have spoken in Muslim countries, and but innately I have a little bit of a laugh, because I know that when I speak, I stand up for what I speak. I strongly believe that what I say has some level of truth and what I stand for. And I don't think that you can do this job by faking it in any way. You really have to have a conviction of what you do, and you have to make known that where you stand strong. And that strength and courage and that truth is what guides me and what keeps me going.
Thank you so much. Alana, so I would love to hear from particularly you and Sara, and maybe Anino, you can join us on this as well. I'm conflicted here. So what is the archetype of leadership in this modern day? Are we looking for that masculine energy? Is it still pervasive and necessary? Are we saying that we all need to learn a bit of a softer touch around how to approach issues? And I suppose the real question I'm asking is this. So help me. It's a selfish question. I'm often conflicted when I've got to make really, really big decisions about, do I go aggressive, you know, alpha male Vusi Tembewayo with the you know, Lamborghini bullhorns? Or do I take the other approach, is the other way to say it. And what I'm asking for from all three of you is just to help me with that. What is the archetype of how we lead at a time like this, so that the people joining us in this conversation, particularly the women joining us in this conversation, can learn, where do we draw that line? Where is the place where I stand up and I go, this is enough and no more, and I'm going to pound my chest now and hold my own? Or where do I adopt the softer energy that's a bit more about compassion, listening, etc.? Maybe just help us with that. What would be your thoughts on that, ladies?
Alana, you're on mute.
Unmuted. Unmute first. That's the first one to do.
Sara, don't forget, I need to hear from you as well on this.
Okay.
The big thing that I would say on this one is, at the moment, in particular, it really resonates with me on how things were in the bank, because we're in a time of huge change, and emotions play a huge part in the change cycle. So sometimes, you know, fear could just show up in an aggressive form, or and it's identifying what cycle each person that you work with is in of that change cycle. Are they still in that fear of the unknown cycle? Are they in the motivated stage? You know, which stage are they in? And identify what is motivating you. So is shouting at that person actually going to achieve what you want to achieve, or is listening to them and identifying what their motivation is, working with their motivation and moving them through that into the next stage of the change cycle, that'll get you there. Very often, don't get me wrong, I've got 2 kids, sometimes you have to shout, but the majority of the times it can be found through listening and identifying and working on motivation.
Excellent. Sara, your thoughts? And then Anino will come to you.
I think there's 2 things there. I think we all have a responsibility to grow up, to be flexible, to grow our style. And I think the authenticity question is an interesting one, because I know that I have seen young people believe they can't do something or be someone, and then you encourage them to try something which feels deeply uncomfortable, or maybe not what they feel is authentically themselves. But through that practice, or through that just experiment, they find, oh, hello, I can be confident, or I can say what I thought I couldn't say, or I can achieve that. So I think authenticity is a paradox often, because I think sometimes, and I really love this phrase, and that you can act your way into a new way of thinking, as well as think your way into a new way of acting. And sometimes you might just need to just, and I say this cautiously, but I think sometimes we have to pretend that we can be confident to wake ourselves up to the fact that we are good at something, or that we can find our voice in something. And I know for me, particularly working in very, very challenging comprehensives, I had to pretend that I was confident in classes, because if I didn't, I'd have been absolutely annihilated by a lot of these young, difficult young people. And they needed me to feel strong, because in their life they didn't. So I had to pretend that I was, when actually for moments I didn't feel strong. So I suppose, in answer to your question, Lisa, I think sometimes we have to experiment with different flavors of ourselves to open up the capacity of who we can be. And sometimes we've been told we can only be one thing. And so we've practiced that more often. But I think there's a space, and I'd be really interested to know what others feel here, but I think there is a space where we can afford to try new things, but it's judging when it's the most useful time for us to do that. So I think there's a flex there. And the other thing I just like to say is that I do think, back to listening, back to Alana's point, I think the skill of really truly listening is more needed now than ever before. And I just want to say something that I found incredibly helpful from my daughter, actually, who had done an improvisation class. And a director had said to her, the skill of improvisation, Matty, is to love the other person more than yourself when you are listening to them. And I think there's something about listening, finding the other person more important than you when you are truly listening is a really, really important point of listening. And sometimes I think it's finding that moment, and actually what's going on in my head is irrelevant. I need to really and utterly believe that what that person is saying is more important than me right now for me to really understand it. Doesn't mean that I have to agree with it, but I do have to really listen to it to understand it, to then be able to come back to it. So those two things I know are maybe a bit, maybe not everybody agrees, but I think they're interesting areas.
Thank you so much. Doc, what would you say?
I'd like to add, to what Alana and Sara have said. And I think that when we're looking at leadership, in the future, that right now we're in the age where, of artificial intelligence as an emerging technology, and machine learning and automation. And what the research has shown, looking at how organizations prize leadership or senior management, is that once you have routine tasks, computerized and all of that, that the skills that are important are the human skills. And one of the most important skills for the future in leadership is empathy. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't make those hard decisions. You make them, but you make them with empathy. So if, for example, you have to let go of staff, it's not that you have to keep them on when you can't continue to keep them on, but it's with empathy. Just a little story of two women that I work with, senior leaders who are, CEOs at the highest levels. And at this time, with all what is happening, I thought, we'll have an extra session to help them cope. These two women were living their best lives. The issues and the scale of the problem, they were actually thriving in their roles as leaders. And that, I think, was because as a woman, those skills that they had, as well as business people, were those skills that were needed. So they were able to carry on with their business functions, but also with their roles of bringing people together, of empathy, and they were absolutely thriving. Yes, they were very busy and quite stressed, but they were thriving.
Love that. So Nomsa and Roberta and Babalwa, then I want you to kind of, tip this off for us at the end. One of the interesting lessons I've learned, and I learned it through reflection, was that the way exclusion works is that exclusion finds systems to permeate. So exclusionary tactics are typically not written. There's very few places, unless you go to a gentleman's club, right? But there's very few places you'll go to where it says you are not allowed. That's not generally how exclusion works. So Dr. Roberta, your example, for instance, about trying to access funding. It's not that when you go and say, well, women don't get funding. That's not policy, but it's policy by practice rather than policy by stipulation, right? And so one of the things that, just for you ladies to help me understand is these very subtle systems of exclusion built into how people act, how they behave, how they make decisions, and then how they build those places where we must work. So the corporation where you work, Sis Nomsa, the sport that you play, Babalwa, the investments that you make, Roberta, how do you deal with trying to navigate those systems of exclusion? Before you answer, just one final caveat. Because one of the hard things to do is if you approach that system with an aggressive mindset and an aggressive mentality, the whole ecosystem is thrown back at you. And then you end up fighting the system so hard that you actually don't make any meaningful progress. Your whole energy goes towards fighting rather than the thing you were trying to do in the first place. So I'd love to learn from each of you a little bit about how you subtly make waves and moves and keep this very subtle sophistication, but at the same time deliberately break down the systems of exclusion. Nomsa, I'll start with you.
It's
definitely... You must admit, I ask good questions, ne?
You do. It's definitely not by sucking up, right? But what you need is to understand the terrain, right? And also understand who's in your corner, because there are certain things, as you said, that they're not written anywhere, but you'll find that so-and-so is so-and-so's neighbor and they play golf and, they enjoy a bottle of whiskey, you don't drink whiskey. So, somehow you become outside of the thing. So that's why it's very key for us to create our own networks, right? Because you need to be able to make an impact where you have a line of control or rather influence. Because if you start wanting to get into the C-suite when you are still very junior, you can find yourself tripping in all sorts of things. But I think when you take time to just say, what is the game plan here and where do I fit in and what difference will I make, right? So if you walk in and you say, but I'm entitled, I have a degree, I've had 2 years experience, so therefore this job is mine, you're not going to get it, right? But understand because the cultures are also different in different companies. Other companies are much more amenable to saying we've got a deliberate development plan, others don't. So know your environment and respond accordingly. But there is no one size fits all. And I think the fighting, as you say, the entire system will collapse on you because it's just, you become this voice, especially as a woman, you just become this chihuahua that is just, so you've just got to be
Yeah. Roberta?
Yeah, so I'll say that I think I touched on this in the introduction. There are 4 points that I want to touch on that I've actually been leading by being self-aware and genuine. So in every situation that I find myself in, I'm very genuine and honest about what I know, what I understand, and what I don't know or I don't understand. And in every situation where I lack certain expertise, I always lean on the advice of people that are experts. So I've always run a very lean operation, right? Where I partner with established so for instance, I'll give you an example. Going into a sector that I completely don't understand, I normally partner with a big company that has infrastructure and expertise so that I can learn. And I've always used soft power and my ability I'm very great with relationship management. And I know that that is my skill set. I'm not the person crunching the numbers. But in the business that I do, you do need, to be able to defend the numbers. So I'll get the person on the team that crunches the number. I sit with them, try to understand the basic, the part of the how do you call it, presentation, so that when I'm in the room, I can also defend any arguments that come up. So you have to have enough to be dangerous, as they say it. But in cases where you don't have a full understanding, it's okay to be vulnerable enough, because I think it also comes back to what Dr. Anino said about empathy and about vulnerability. It's so important because oftentimes we feel the archetype is coming in, knowing everything and having the answers to it all. But most of the time, people actually want to understand your own vulnerability because that also helps them relate to you as a human being. So it's okay to exhibit those as well. And then two other things. Most of the time, you have to be, I'm always like looking at being mission driven and focus on results. So I'll give you an example. I think we even talked about this, which is a large creative arts fund. Everyone said it's impossible. You know, why are you going into the sector? You don't understand finance. I took 2 years to build a team, bring on the expertise, bring on the strategy. And now when we're speaking to investors, it's very different from when I started on my own 2 years ago. And it's okay to focus on the result and be patient enough to go on that journey, because I've learned so much about myself that I didn't even know, you know, and it's a constant journey for me and always learning and renewing my abilities. So that's also an important attribute.
Yeah, you and I work in the same sector, so I completely understand how exclusionary this investment climate is. It's a big boys club. It's very cigar driven, very sherry, port drinking, you know, meetings at the World Economic Forum. It's very suave, darling, very panache. And, you know, if you are in the impact space like you and I, and you just want to see results, you want to help people, there's almost like well, you don't belong here, you know, because you know. So Babalwa, let's close with you. So how do you deal with exclusion? I mean, you know, when you're coming into a sport and you're told it's not for people like you, how have you dealt with that mindset?
Well, I think on a personal level, I dealt with that by actually forcing you know, the relevant people to notice and to pay attention. And sports is a results driven. It's all sports are results driven. You must put up good performances week in, week out. And I've made sure that you know, my performances speak for me. For instance, if I say I want a piece of the pie, I will be asked, but what did you bring to the table? And I back myself in saying that well, first of all, I'm the first African woman to play professional rugby in this continent. Actually, no one has done that before. So you must pay attention. You must listen to me because I have the record to sort of back that up. And you know, with us, I feel that you know, the more you make a lot of noise about inclusion, is the more you will be excluded, because you almost become an annoyance. Because traditionally in this country, rugby is dominated by male Afrikaners, if I may put it that way. And for a black young woman from Kalyan, which is one of the most notorious townships, to come and say, look, I've made history on the when it comes to rugby in the whole continent. On top of that, I head up the Springboks, which is the national team who competes globally. Surely that should be enough for me to be able to, you know, be included, or for all of us as female rugby players to be included. But again, you know, we can't really fight too much. In as much as you know, we want to shake the tables, we can shake the tables, and we are doing that. But you know, we still want you know, a place at that table. So it's more consultative as well than it is as much as it is you know, results driven. You produce the results constantly, and you have to work extra hard to produce those results that sometimes the guys take for granted. And you know, with them, it's you know, the bare minimum is enough, but for us it isn't. So we constantly have to prove ourselves, constantly have to work hard, just so we can be noticed and actually have the attention and be invited to these discussions of you know, involvement and inclusion more than anything. So apart from everything else, we must produce the goods. You know, we must show the results.
Ladies, we've reached the end of our time, and I'm quite sad actually, because second page of notes with questions. So, you know, what are you going to do? What I would like to do is, you know, just go kind of in the alphabetical order and get closing comments, just a 2-minute single takeaway for you based on this conversation. And here's how I'd like you to frame it. So I'd like you to imagine you're speaking to a person who is 10 years behind where you are today. That person is similar to you, similar background, etc. And you would give them one cardinal piece of advice, just as a takeaway, about how to build a life of meaning and of substance and achieve the things that they want to achieve. What would you say? And because it's in alphabetical order, we're going to start with the Scottish. Alana.
Listen, 10 years ago, I certainly wasn't the person I was today, but that doesn't make me any less. You've got to keep building yourself up. Always keep going for your dreams. When I achieve a dream, the first thing now we can compare ourselves to our male counterparts all we want. It doesn't matter. We've got to be a better version of our own selves. That's the only person we need to be having a competition with or fighting with or whatever it might be. Just keep surrounding yourself with the right people. There's so many positive, amazing, wonderful people. Yes, there is negative. Yes, there is bad. You're always going to come across them, but when you meet that good person, that amazing person, that person that inspires you, that drives you, that gives you that feeling of I want to be like them, then take that and absorb it. When the negative comes near you, just move away from it. I can literally feel when negative's around me now, and I just cut myself right away from it. You don't need that in your life. By surrounding yourself with positive, amazing people, it will come into you. And make sure you ask for help as well. As is my second point, is always never be ashamed or embarrassed if you're feeling the need to be supportive, because you know, especially with the S Connect group, we've got an amazing group of people supporting us here and are there when we need them.
Excellent. Beverly?
To unmute myself there. Thanks, Lucy. I think just leading on, Alana's opened that up very nicely. So the question I should ask somebody who's 10 years behind me is, what do you need to be in order to be the success or the dream that you so want to fulfill in your life? So what is it that you need? And today, you know, women and young girls are no longer restricted from information or from the ability to learn. We have the internet right at our disposal. What do you need to learn in order to get those skills that will drive you forward as a formidable person on this planet? So start learning, ask for help. I absolutely agree. Start looking for woman inspiration leaders that inspire you every day. Look at the positives, listen to the positives only, and never ever let anyone tell you that you're not good enough.
Love that. Babalwa?
Well, I think that, you know, the key thing is that as young people, no matter where we are from, is not to allow our surroundings to limit our vision and our dream. I always say this because you know, we grow up in quite difficult. Some of us we grow up in quite difficult you know, circumstances. So much that it's difficult to see beyond the physical. It's difficult to see beyond your current hardship. So what I'd say is that we should be able to visualize outside of that. Visualize something greater than your current situation and have a dream and start working towards it, you know, and internalize it and make it your own. And again, it's very important what Beverly and Alana said, is to ask for help. And when help is offered as well, to not be afraid to take it, you know, and just keep learning as much as possible. I think that's the one for me.
Thank you. Anino, I should have gone with you immediately after Alana, but you know, it says Dr. Anino, so mine defaulted to the D rather than the A. But Anino, what would be your closing parting shots?
Not a problem, Vusi. My closing is this, is women are very good at performing. And very often, women coming up the ladder expect to be recognized. But in corporate world and even in business, you need to develop visibility. You need for people to tell people your story. You need people to hear you. So don't sit back waiting to be discovered. You need to tell people, and also ask for what you want. Very often women don't do that. Ask.
Love that, love that, love that. Absolutely love that. Koosum, could we come to you, Mom?
Thank you, Lucy. I think my parting shots are: aim to be the best in your profession, be yourself, assist communities, and be a helping hand. Stand out in a crowd, find a mentor or mentors. It's good to have a few mentors. Balance your life with yoga and meditation, which I strongly believe in, and create your networks and use your networks.
Great. Absolutely love that. Absolutely love that. Nomsa, can we come to you?
Oh, I think what I would say to my 40-year-old self, I'd probably say
21, Nomsa, 21. Come on.
Given that we don't have the confidence of a male that will walk into a room whilst they know nothing but still find a seat at the table. We have to recognize that, the scoreboard is the only place that counts, right? For us, at least. The scoreboard is the only place that counts. So we have to be consistent in our delivery. Absolutely and non-negotiable. And we have to define our own success. What does success mean to you as an individual, right? Because sometimes we define success by everybody that is around us, and then when those things come, you are still not happy, you are still not content. So define your own success so that as you go after these goals, you know what the good feel of it is. So, and yeah, your networks are everything. You speak up and just speak up. That's it.
Love that, love that, love that. Sara, I beg your pardon, actually, before I go to Sara. Roberta, you're next. Sorry, Sara.
It's okay. Okay, so thank you so much, Lucy. So I'll leave 4 nuggets. Number 1 is to be self-aware and genuine. Number 2 is to be mission-driven and focused on results. Number 3 is to lead with your heart. Number 4 is to focus on the long term and not blindsided by the short-term distractions. And finally, I would like to close by urging us to envision a world which is not fueled by fear, but authentically by love. As captured in these poignant words, I'm going to read a quote from this unknown author. Authenticity is freedom from the illusion of fear and alignment to the love. Thank you.
Love that. Thank you so much. Sara, would you close it up?
I'd leave with the reminder that we all have choice, even though sometimes we feel we don't, to keep connecting that we all have choice. And I would invite everybody to connect to what matters to them every day. Just find a way of connecting to what really matters to you every day, to surround what everyone else has said at this point, but I think it's really important to surround yourself with boosters, people that really give you energy, and to remember that we can always choose our mood, even though it may feel like we can't, we can. And in order to do any of that, I think to remember that we need to look after ourselves and to make sure that we have things in our lives that give us the fuel that we really need in order to do all of the things that all of us have spoken to do today. We have to put ourselves very firmly at our own heart.
Thank you so much. Let me, as we end, just say that one of the greatest gifts I think that's come out of this pandemic has been this forced disconnect that many of us have had to go through with many of the distractions we've had in the world. But all of a sudden, many of us had to go to lockdowns, and you had to confront the person you were running from, the one you spent maybe 30 seconds looking at in the mirror every morning. And you had to confront the life that you had chosen and the partners that you had chosen and this life that you'd constructed. I'm heartened at this conversation, ladies. I've learned an awful amount. I think there's just such inspiration and story. And to the great team at S-Connect that have put this together, thank you for doing so. So, happy Women's Day, ladies, on the 9th of August. Thank you so much for having had me as your moderator. Thoroughly underqualified, but very humbled that you've invited me here. Thank you all so much. Amazing Friday.
Thank you.
Lucy. Thank you all.
Bye.